Nate Diaz versus Max Holloway. Is this the right fight for Diaz's UFC return? Is Nate Diaz really the same fighter he once was? That's the burning question swirling around the MMA world as talk of a potential return gains momentum, especially with his name being tied to a high-profile matchup against Max Holloway. Recently, Diaz stirred up the conversation by claiming that Holloway was wearing his BMF belt, referencing the iconic title fight from 2019 where Nate faced off against Jorge Masvidal. That bout ended in controversy when a doctor stopped the fight due to a severe cut near Diaz's eye, awarding Masvidal the victory via TKO. Since then, the BMF title has evolved, and not in the way many fans expected. But here's where it gets controversial. Holloway recently defended the BMF title at UFC 318 by defeating Dustin Poirier in a grueling unanimous decision. And according to Diaz, both Poirier and Holloway were essentially fighting over what he considers his legacy. This isn't just about pride, though. It's about relevance. Diaz, who turned 40 earlier this year, hasn't competed inside the octagon since 2022, when he submitted Tony Ferguson at UFC 279. Since then, he's dipped his toes into boxing, going 1-1, losing a highly publicized bout to Jake Paul, but edging out Jorge Masvidal in a razor-thin and hotly debated decision last summer. And this is the part most people miss. While Diaz may still carry the heart of a warrior, his time away from MMA training raises serious questions about whether he can keep up with elite-level fighters like Holloway. Daniel Cormier, former two-division champion and current UFC commentator, didn't hold back when asked about the proposed matchup. On the podcast Good Guy, Bad Guy, Cormier expressed doubts about whether Diaz could even hang in there with Holloway. I have a hard time thinking that Nate Diaz can fight right now with a guy like Max Holloway. Cormier said, because Max Holloway is still ascending. He went on to explain that while Diaz remains a skilled and respected fighter, stepping away from active MMA competition for an extended period can take a toll. Cormier drew a parallel to Amanda Nunes, suggesting that fighters don't improve by sitting on the sidelines. Unless Nate has been in training camp this whole time wrestling, grappling, striking, it'll be hard to get back in there at a championship level, Cormier added. What makes this debate even more compelling is how the BMF title itself has changed. Originally intended as a platform for fighters who weren't necessarily in line for official title shots, the BMF belt has now become a prize contested by some of the sport's biggest names, including Gaethje, Poirier, and now Holloway. These aren't underdogs anymore. They're proven champions. Cormier emphasized that the modern BMF division is no longer the scrappy, unpredictable undercard showcase it once was. This is the biggest difference. The BMF title isn't what it used to be, he noted. Still, Cormier admitted he'd be interested to see Diaz return, if only because any appearance by the Stockton legend is worth watching. But he questioned whether Holloway is the right opponent for this stage in Diaz's career. Would love it for Holloway because that means a lot of money in his pocket. But I just don't know if that's the right fight for Diaz, Cormier concluded. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Should Nate Diaz really step back into the octagon at 40 years old to face one of the most dynamic strikers in the sport? Or is this a nostalgic dream that might end in disappointment? The UFC resurrected the BMF title in 2023 at lightweight, 4 years after its original debut. After years of dormancy, Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier reignited interest in the belt at UFC 291. With Gaethje winning it in spectacular fashion via head kick knockout. Holloway's victory over Poirier at UFC 318 marked the first successful title defense in the new era of the BMF championship. Now, with Diaz eyeing a return and publicly naming Holloway as a target, the stakes are higher than ever. But is this a dream matchup or a potential mismatch? Weigh in below. Do you think Nate Diaz still has what it takes to compete with top-tier fighters like Max Holloway? Or should he consider hanging up the gloves on a legendary career? Let us know what you think. And don't forget to share your take in the comments. Nate Diaz UFC return imminent? Chael Sonnen reveals personal conversation. The buzz surrounding Nate Diaz's potential return to the UFC is intensifying, especially after a conversation with a notable former fighter who claims to have spoken directly with him. Since his last appearance in the UFC back in 2022, where he concluded his contract with a thrilling pay-per-view main event against fellow veteran Tony Ferguson, Diaz has been absent from the octagon. This fight was particularly noteworthy as it came together on short notice after his original opponent, Khamzat Chimaev, failed to make weight. Diaz ended his UFC career on a high note, submitting Ferguson with a guillotine choke at UFC 279. A victory that undoubtedly left fans eager for more action from this beloved fighter. But here's where it gets intriguing. If we take the word of this UFC legend, there's a strong possibility that fans might soon see Diaz back in the cage. Chael Sonnen, a well-known figure in the MMA community, expressed his confidence in Diaz's return after having a personal discussion with him. "I don't believe that Nate is going to come back against any 155-pounder. Sonnen stated during an episode of ESPN MMA's Good Guy Bad Guy YouTube show. He noted that while Diaz sometimes references his past fights at lightweight, he doesn't see that as his future path. However, Sonnen emphasized that his conversation with Diaz leads him to believe that a comeback is more likely than many might assume. In the 3 years since leaving the UFC, the 40-year-old Diaz has participated in 2 boxing matches. After suffering a loss to Jake Paul, he managed to avenge a previous defeat by defeating Jorge Masvidal in the ring, 5 years after their initial encounter at Madison Square Garden. Despite Paul extending an offer for a rematch in MMA and claims from Josh Thomson that Diaz's team has a contract for a return fight, Diaz has not stepped back into the ring since then. Instead, he has been active on social media, posting about Max Holloway and his BMF title. It appears that Diaz has been contemplating a return to the UFC for some time, as he recently shared a list of potential opponents he would like to face. During an appearance on the HJR podcast, he expressed his desire to return to the UFC, stating, "If they have me, I would like to go back and whoop someone's ass there." He acknowledged the current lack of compelling matchups, saying, "I'm not fighting in there because there's nobody to fight really. It's kinda slow rolling." When discussing a potential trilogy fight with Conor McGregor, Diaz remarked, "Whenever he's back, me and him for sure got unfinished business. Gotta happen." He also mentioned 2 other fighters he is interested in facing, Max Holloway, who currently holds the title Diaz has been eyeing, and Ilia Topuria, who recently achieved a significant victory by knocking out Charles Oliveira. "The BMF title is the most entertaining there is. I hope you, Holloway, know you're wearing my belt," Diaz stated, highlighting his competitive spirit. He concluded by expressing his eagerness to fight top-tier opponents, including Topuria, whom he acknowledged as a formidable competitor. As the speculation continues, one has to wonder, will Nate Diaz truly make his much-anticipated return to the UFC? What do you think? Are you excited to see him back in action, or do you believe he should stay retired? Share your thoughts in the comments. Josh Thomson slams Nate Diaz's UFC return chances. Can he still compete? Nate Diaz's potential UFC return has the MMA world buzzing, but not everyone is convinced it's a good idea. Former rival and MMA analyst Josh Thomson has openly expressed his skepticism, sparking a debate that's as fiery as Diaz's fighting style. But here's where it gets controversial. Thomson doesn't just doubt Diaz's chances. He flat out believes the MMA superstar can't beat anyone in the UFC today, except for one ranked welterweight. Bold claim? Absolutely. And this is the part most people miss. Thomson isn't just talking trash. He's breaking down the matchups with a level of insight only a seasoned fighter turned analyst can provide. Let's face it, Nate Diaz is the epitome of unpredictability. His ability to keep fans and opponents guessing is part of his charm. With his iconic status in combat sports, he's earned the right to keep us all on the edge of our seats. Lately, whispers of his UFC return have grown louder, fueled by Diaz's own willingness to step back into the octagon. But here's the catch. While Diaz seems ready, the UFC's interest remains a mystery. Dana White might see dollar signs in a Diaz comeback, but the question lingers, is it a smart move for the promotion? And this is where the controversy deepens. Thomson, who once defeated Diaz, isn't holding back. On the Weighing In podcast, he bluntly stated, "I don't think he beats anyone." Ouch. But Thomson isn't all doom and gloom. He admits there are a few fights he'd actually enjoy seeing. A rematch with Leon Edwards? Sure. A showdown with Daniel D-Rod Rodriguez, the number 13 ranked welterweight? Absolutely. West Coast gangsters, Thomson quipped, suggesting Diaz might only stand a chance against a select few. But against someone like Jeff Neal, Thomson's take, he'd murder him. What's even more intriguing is Thomson's willingness to entertain the idea of facing Diaz himself, not in the UFC, but in the world of bare-knuckle boxing. Talk about adding fuel to the fire. This isn't just a debate about Diaz's future. It's a question of legacy, relevance, and the evolving landscape of MMA.